Hi, welcome back. I am here with Joe Papa, Princeton Kaizen's AI guru, and we are taking a continued deep dive into AI for content. And I thought I would start or spend a segment here talking about the Princeton Kaizen metaverse and how it was developed with the tools of which we speak. All these different generative AI tools have been used to help to build what we're doing here at Princeton Kaizen. And I wanted to start, we've been talking a lot about ChatGPT, and I wanted to start by looking at Mid-Journey. I started my journey with AI, actually with DALL-E. I think I was turned onto it at some point last year and was playing around with it and was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I could put an astronaut in the middle of the desert or whatever the case may be. When ChatGPT followed by Mid-Journey came out, I became much more of a Mid-Journey person. I know other people, are using Stable Diffusion. There are all kinds of different tools now for this, but I wanted to go through our own, this is our AI studio, but a lot of the process we went through to kind of create the universe of Princeton Kaizen, just to show you some of the tools you can use. And I'm going to start with a look at our 2476.
Now the whole world knows.
2764, it doesn't matter.
All right. We can cut that part out, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, so I'm going to start with, that's what you said.
So I'm going to start with a look at our own metaverse, the Princeton Kaizen kind of graphic interface that we created with Mid-Journey. Starting with this is our Innovation Studio page, and I just wanted to kind of scroll through this and talk this stuff through with you, Joe, because it really was a process of discovery for me. I spent one weekend going, God, our graphics, we got these great summit photography, and we have great videos from our January summit. But in terms of kind of establishing the Princeton Kaizen sort of brand, et cetera, I thought, all right, I'm going to just sort of see what I can cook up on Mid-Journey. And I started with really kind of baseline prompts. And I was watching people make, their own prompts in this thing. And I started to copy and paste a couple of ideas together. And over time, I developed what you see on the left there, this light bulb. This basic prompt was the output of about 2 to 3 weeks of trial and error, and then finally finding this particular prompt where I could sub out light bulb or compass or whatever the particular icon might be. It was pretty good for that. And then you see in the background, this is the background for Ari's Methods of Invention show. And if we scroll down further, this is my Innovation Studio. But so you see where we're starting to create our own metaverse with all of this. And if we keep going further down here, this was from that same initial prompt. This was a seed, and it came up with the eye on its own. So this is, as you can see, that background piece right there. That is meant to be it was the same input that I gave for that light bulb that you saw in the first thing, but this was a seed, and I may have changed it from a black background to a white background or vice versa. Did not do a whole lot further with that, but it started to give us this sensibility that over time, we started to refine, and even down to when I gave this input, Ari and Greg were putting together the backbone for Everlasting Business. I created that thing on the left, and then Ari and Greg said, okay, well, we like the desert idea for our Zoom background. We want to have a window that sort of looks out over that sort of landscape. So we created that. And then here, and this is I think one of my favorite pieces, and this is where I think taking the machine-made product and then putting it back into Photoshop, the brain on the left was all over the place. It had lots of different, pieces, and I just took it into Photoshop and I cut out all the extraneous pieces and I made it into a much clearer piece. And I did the same thing, actually, if we go all the way back to the top, you see all the way, the logo for Princeton Kaizen. Oh, the Z is just very faint there in the top upper left. Okay, well, that's not the best version of, is there any way we can show that Z in better relief? Anyway, this was originally, the Z was an enclosed, it was like the Boston logo. It was like a big round loop, and I just went through and I cut that small part. And I'm not a graphics person, but it is amazing, the smallest piece. Well, there's Joe Papa in our innovation studio. I'm going to see if there's a better version of where I can find that Z. If we go to our
I can put it up on the screen.
When you say Z, you're talking about the logo?
Yeah.
So is that an actual character, or is that something you created?
That's something I created. I created these. There it is. There it is.
All right.
So yeah, this Z, which I was just looking for a favicon for Princeton Kaizen, and I literally just I said I need a favicon for Princeton Kaizen was the first thing, and you go through like back and forth, and then you go, oh, that Z is kind of interesting, and then you're like, okay, then what I really need is just a Z with a Japanese flavor to it, and it gave me this, but the whole Z was enclosed. You can't really tell. I'd have to go find the original. Maybe if I can put that in the chat notes, so you can see what it was in its originally. But these three items, and these are, I think, fairly alpha versions of our iconography, which could use a little bit of an update. But this was putting light bulb, vintage mic, vintage movie camera into the same thing, and understanding that if I use the same core prompts, I'm going to have something that sort of fits in that iconography, that fits in that particular space. Mm-hmm.
This is so interesting. So can I ask you some questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Great. So first of all, the logo, the Princeton Kaizen logo there, that Z, you're calling the Z, I thought that was a Chinese or Japanese character.
Nope.
For Kaizen. That's what I thought, but you used Midjourney AI generation tool to create that. That's amazing.
And well, here's the interesting part is that I think that actually came out of a question that I first put to ChatGPT. I was like, I need you to give me a prompt for Midjourney for a logo. And I was looking for, both the logo and for a favicon, and they kind of merged together. A favicon, if for those who don't know, it's that little thing at the top of the web page that is like the big G for Google or the F for Facebook or whatever the case may be. Can be sometimes just a mark. It doesn't have to be a letter. But that process was all just trial and error initially. And I think that's sort of where we are with a lot of the stuff. And I think the people who have put in those hours up front, like as you have with ChatGPT, with Jasper, with other elements, I'm reminded of like Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers. He talks about, by the time that Bill Gates got to college, he already had 10,000 hours of coding experience because he was in this school, I think it was in Seattle, wherever it was initially, where by virtue of the luck of the draw, they had a mainframe computer there, and he was coding from being a freshman in high school to arriving at Harvard. And he was like, well, I don't need to be here. I mean, I already know how to do all this stuff. I think that's going to be very, very true for generative AI, is the people who are able to log in those 10,000 hours early
So that's interesting. You bring up Gladwell and the outliers concept of this 10,000 hours to master something. This AI is going to reduce that 10,000 down to something much less, maybe 100 hours. Maybe that's the kind of leverage that this is providing. And you're a great example of this. Like, you don't have to put 10,000 hours and look at the results you're getting. Right? So this is amazing. Like, to think like
That is a good point.
Designer that would have had to learn skills, that would have learned that not only just the conceptual theory, artistic skills that are required to do this, but also the technical skills to use a tool like Photoshop or some other tool that you would use. All that in that 10,000 hours. And you talk about programming too. I'll point this out. Is coding. I just taught a 3-hour course on how to use AI generation tools to write code. Right. So my background, my two books on AI are on PyTorch and deep learning. I teach developers how to create AI. Coding is a huge thing. So now you're talking about Bill Gates, 10,000 hours to learn how to write code. You get somebody that's in middle school that can go and learn how to write code 100 hours. Phenomenal.
Well, that's what's interesting to me is taking somebody who has 10,000 hours already in an allied field and giving them these tools. And some of them are going like, no, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to be involved in that because it's, we do things by the human hand. Where it gets interesting though is, you can see the little ghost of a Z I put in the back of this particular thing, and I played around with trying to get that brain, that kind of robotic brain from that previous screen. I was going to try to stick it in the back here and find a way to make that sort of work. And somebody with better Photoshop skills could actually make that happen. And that's what strikes me about the opportunity here is the more we put Midjourney back into Photoshop or take Opus Pro and the clips that it's marked for us and take it back into Premiere Pro, or take ChatGPT and put it back into a Word document or a Pages document, whatever, but where we start to put the human hand back into the mix, that's where this starts to get interesting. That's where and I wish I was a better, creative director to be able to show you guys, this is what a hack like me can do. And if you consider what people are doing right now on Midjourney, you're getting these absolutely, utterly amazing outputs from people who are putting in lens specifications, Photoshop filters, other pieces. This is where I think the sooner you get, maybe you don't need 10,000 hours, you only need, a couple hundred hours, but you've got to bring your 10,000 hours from another allied field to it and put that, piece of art that you got out of Midjourney back into Photoshop and see what you can do with it at that point. That to me strikes me as where the opportunity is.
Yeah. Can we walk through the process a little bit more?
Sure.
So I remember, and this was a pivotal point back in like mid the summer, I think of just a year ago. I think this was 2022, where the first magazine cover was 100% AI generated. This was Cosmo magazine. DALL-E 2, the artist used DALL-E 2 to create the cover. And I remember when she was describing the experience, she had said that there was, I think she went through like 1,000 prompts to get what she wanted, but it took that long. So in your experience creating the Z, right, the logo, how long did that take and how many prompts do you think it took to get it just perfect?
Wow, I'd say that was probably about 20 plus. And that because I didn't realize that I wanted the mark until I saw it. Sometimes you don't know exactly. I think the first prompt I put in was, I need a logo for Princeton Kaizen. And in maybe the 7th or 8th generation iteration, it pulled out the Z in an interesting way. And there was a lot of really crappy looking Zs, but I sort of went, aha, the Z is a good idea. And it's Kaizen. It's the Zen of Kaizen. So it seemed to be appropriate, and that was, little trial and error, and then suddenly realizing that, okay, the prompt. Here's an interesting thing. We were just creating a background for Amy Randall's. She's Ari's collaborator, and she's his co-host for Methods of Invention, and she is dialing in remotely, so we needed to create her own background. And she's a writer, and she said, well, I'd like to have something that kind of has a little air of the Dick Van Dyke Show, da-da-da-da-da. And I put that in a couple of times there, and then I realized, well, it doesn't really understand like what the look and feel of the Dick Van Dyke Show is. And then I put in mid-century modern, and then suddenly it clicked, and it understands design cues, and the people who are successful using it understand what those design cues are. So once I realized it was the Z that I wanted, and that it was a Japanese inflected Z. I think that the last, 10 of those were just like me being a rabid perfectionist and really kind of taking it further. Cause I think that was like the first 15 were like, they weren't going anywhere, but they started to get you to the idea of what this thing could actually become.
Very interesting. I would point out a couple of things you mentioned, like really the prompts, being able to come up with the right prompts is huge, right? Like that's really determines. And you had mentioned before using another tool like ChatGPT to even give you some ideas of what you can use for prompts, and then being able to work through that. At what point was there ever a point where you thought like you how did you decide I should keep going with this? Or should you start over? Did you ever think about that in the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an instinct you hone when you do have 10,000 hours as a creative director. You kind of go like, this is promising or this is not going anywhere, right? And you have to have that sort of fish or cut bait moment. And I've had a lot of cut bait moments. The first version of this, I think this one actually uses the prompt AI laboratory with shades of the movie Minority Report. And you were the one who came up with the Minority Report idea. But I think the first version of it was mission control. And it felt like you were in the middle of a spaceship or like Houston. And it didn't quite seem like what we were trying to get at with this. So, it's just a matter of sometimes figuring out what that descriptive word is that's going to make it click. And I think a lot of that is just, trial and error, and also stick-to-itiveness. It's being like, I think there's something's going to come out of this, right?
So you mentioned, this is interesting, of the mindset behind this is you're describing the mindset of a creative director. And so should artists start thinking about
absolutely
becoming creative directors?
100%, 100%. Like somebody who can, I really do believe that there is, and I'm not at all pretending like this particular, what is it? This is a piece of art, but I do think that art is going to emerge from this that is very human and is very humanistic and is driven by humans, but is aided by somebody who can act like a creative director who can basically say like, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I'm looking for, and to continually kind of move the pieces around until you get something that you feel like, yeah, that's it. And I think having grown up in the publishing industry and gone through the process of iteratively, adjusting copy, adjusting images, adjusting all the different pieces that go into something that you're going to ultimately take to market. That's a process that I think helps. And if you don't have that particular skill set, I think it's useful to find somebody who can come in and sort of offer that. And that's why I also say like creators figure this out now and get your 1,000 hours in or whatever the case may be, but bring the 10,000 hours you already have to make that more relevant to today, because I think that's really the opportunity for creators right now, is to like learn how to make this new medium, whatever it may be. And it's a kind of a multimedia interactive extravaganza, shall we say.
It's a common theme. This applies not only, like, this is an example of art and creative director roles. Same applies in programming. You have coders that are programming the code. You actually got to sit down and write that stuff. But then you have software architects who are kind of pulling in different pieces of the team and architecting, and designers, right? Design the process. So the theme keeps repeating in all these different areas where you're moving away from the people that are actually, doing the lower level work into a role of overseeing the process and really driving the result and the vision, right? So, and if you think of careers, like you think of people's careers, as you might start off as an artist, right? That might be your craft. And this happens all the time in the engineering space, by the way. Very common is you would have people, either programmers or engineers, they like being technical, they like doing the technical work, and they don't want to move into a manager role because they don't want to be, they want to stay technical. They don't want to have to deal with all the manager stuff. But in this case, it's actually like you get to do the fun part. Like, you get to see the vision, you get to pull everything together to get the results that you're looking for without having to do that long, time-consuming work to get the result.
And this is, I think, why I would recommend for anybody who's got that sort of top-tier creative director capability, editorial, you've sort of been able to sit at the top of a creative organization, perhaps, or a creative operation. I would recommend you learn this faster than anybody. And it sort of goes against the grain, because usually that's somebody who's sort of later in their career, they're not as early adopting, et cetera. But the people who have the most potential to use this material most effectively, to me, are people who have that sort of top level capability to feed in the original pillars, the original pieces that really go into making something more substantive and more substantial. So, I mean, I think, if you've been a chief marketing officer, a creative director, you've worked at the top echelons of Condé Nast or wherever the case may be, you ought to learn how to do this, because there's an ability to create knowledge bases that are authentic, that are real, that are, large and quickly, much quicker than ever before. I think that's where the capability to sort of see the strategic picture is really sort of can be the difference maker in what you want to do. At least that's my 2 cents on it.
As a business owner, there's a couple of things I want to point out. Number one is, first, this is so amazing, the artwork here. I didn't quite realize this until now, but the quality of what you created for the website, I don't know if we can go back to that, but I just want to emphasize this because I want the people listening to really understand how much you created. So this background, which you were calling the metaverse, and these backgrounds in Princeton Kaizen and Kaizen Academy, these are all AI generated, right? All of these backgrounds are AI generated.
100%. If you can make us smaller there, Felix, I would love to point this particular piece out. So this was, the idea was Princeton Kaizen. And I don't remember what the exact prompt was, but this was Midjourney's interpretation of Kaizen. And I think you get a lot of the elements that, maybe it's a little soft and it's kind of tacking into an Asian-inspired, Zen-inspired background, but people have commented on this and been like, "That's great. That's just so something really, really special." And I would like to take credit for it. I'll take more credit for these because these went through much more. Like that one, the Princeton Kaizen thing, that might have been like a second or third prompt.
Wow.
To be honest, sometimes it just it'll nail it right out of the gate. This was an iterative process, making these come together. And Joe, let me just make this hello. 2 weeks ago, we had a good friend of mine who is building a Web3 platform, the company Real Vision. And I asked him, what was the metaverse? And he said, well, we're in it right now. We were on a Zoom call, and he's like, you've created one. Like, this is a metaverse right now. And we're building this, I guess, virtual reality for people who want to learn innovation and, coaching and training and AI and automation and all those other things. And we're building a new kind of, virtual reality with it. It's not, you don't need a headset for it, but it's its own metaverse. At least that was what his perspective was.
This is for people listening and watching this, it's like, how are you starting to think different? I'm thinking different as a business owner to be more aware that I could create my own, what you call metaverse, which is the surrounding, the environment you're in through this experience, right? So in your case, with our Zoom backgrounds, when we're going into Zoom and we're doing these recordings, the backgrounds just create the experience for us, being able to create that. And then you have the images that are on the website, right? So the images, I'm thinking for my own business, I'm like, man, I'm playing too small here. I need to up my artwork.
That is why I say the people who have the most opportunity here are the people who understand editorial strategy across a gamut of different opportunities, because I could take these books to market, right? If I wanted to, these are good covers, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that I'd have to do an audit of all the hours that I spent making all of this stuff. But in Midjourney, I don't think I've probably spent more than 40 or 50 hours in Midjourney altogether.
Wow, that's amazing.
But I've designed, covers before and that sort of thing. Never had this quality of either you come at it with great pictures to start. If you've got amazing photos, those will do the trick. But otherwise, you need to create something that's sort of got some visual pop to it, and that's what we created here.
Let me ask you this: would you be able to teach somebody how to do this?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it is. I think that I am not the best person to do that. I think that what I would like to do, if I were going to make this an offering within Kaizen Academy, I would. I'm talking to some, creative directors and that sort of thing, where we can bring them in and I can maybe teach them how to become more conversant in, because I do have 10,000 hours on Photoshop and, the Adobe Creative Suite, but I am not by any stretch of the means a real graphic artist of any sort. But if you put this stuff in the hands of a graphic artist and work with them, and continually to sort of say okay, this is interesting, come back and forth. There's no reason. I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, and I said, well, how much did you spend on that one beach shoot you guys did with famous model? She was like, it was about $500,000. And I was like, all right, well, I don't know how much longer those are going to still be around, right?
And what you could do with $500,000 in these tools, right? Being able to train people. Because I think from a training point of view, my company, Truversity, we are focused primarily on training. So we look for, the reason why I asked you, could you train is, maybe it's not you, but is it a process that could be trained? Is as a business owner, this is what I'm thinking in my business, is I'm okay, I want this result. I want these images. I want to up the artwork on my website, in my Zooms, my metaverse, everything I do, I want to now level up the experience through this artwork. So what do I do? What's the choices, right? And this applies to other examples as well. What are my choices as a business owner? Well, I can go ahead and teach somebody to do it, right? So if there's a training program, I can bring in maybe an in-house graphics designer that might have, some experience, whether it's 10,000 hours or they have some experience, and now put them through this training, and now they have the ability to do that. Or I can go out there and hire somebody that already has the experience and the skills and the background that is needed. So there's a couple options there. But this just reveals the fact that people that are in this space, right, like a graphics designer, for example, they should be learning these skills because that's what's going to be in demand. Business owners are going to go out there and they're going to want to know, if I'm going to work with a graphics artist or I'm going to hire a designer, the first question I'm asking is, are you using AI tools? And how long have you been using them? Because that's where I want to know that you're going to have a significant advantage over somebody else that doesn't do it. So what's the differentiator in the job market? You have what's your skills and experience, and are you leveraging technology to get you there faster with better quality?
Well, and I would kind of just put another stake in the ground on this and say that the folks who will be the slowest to adopt are the ones who ought to be the fastest out of the gate, because I do think like you're going to get a lot of junior, you already have it, a lot of junior folks who are suddenly, I was looking for a community manager and I'm having a conversation with somebody who's like, spitting back to me like, marketing speak from Seth Godin, and I'm like, this sounds like ChatGPT. I feel like you're talking to me from ChatGPT. I want to understand what it is that you have to say, and I think that's really for me why I 100% push everybody to retrain and rethink and reorient and adopt this mindset, because anybody can use it. And even the people at the top of the food chain who understand how this stuff has worked historically, they may be slow to get around to adopting these new technologies, but they're the ones who actually have the ability to kind of offer a much richer, a bigger kind of overview and to build an organization and an institution around it. I wouldn't be anywhere near as aggressive with Princeton Kaizen in terms of what we want to put out, were it not for what generative AI can do to help accelerate that particular process.
Wow. It's huge.
So that is this segment on our new presentation of the metaverse of Princeton Kaizen. Hold on, let's start that again. So that is the, we need a closer here. All right, folks, that is the metaverse in the Princeton Kaizen. God damn it. All right, folks, that is the Metaverse Princeton Kaizen edition. We'll be back with a new segment shortly.